Welcome to the Big Scientist channel, where we explore the why so you know how. Today we are diving into a delicious summer dessert with an easy strawberry shortcake recipe. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay updated on all our latest videos. Now let's get into it. To start off this easy summer strawberry dessert, we are going to grate our frozen butter. If you've seen our buttermilk biscuit video, you'll understand the science behind this step, but essentially we're making a shortcake, which is a sweeter biscuit, with a more tender crumb instead of a flaky crumb like a traditional biscuit. A shortcake is considered short because we are actually cutting the butter or shortening into our flour instead of creaming it, which is done in a typical cake recipe. Next, we're going to go ahead and cut up about a pound of fresh strawberries. To make the strawberries soft and create like a little bit of a strawberry syrup, we're going to do something that's a very simple and easy technique, and it's called maceration. Maceration is the process of extracting water from a plant material or fruit, such as the strawberry, by using something like sugar or sucrose or a liquid solvent under room temperatures, so there's no cooking involved. What happens during this maceration process is the cell walls of the plant that are made out of cellulose and hemocellulose dehydrate due to the water loss from the sugar, thus softening the fruit and creating a nice fruity syrup. And this happens because sugar is actually hygroscopic, which means that it has an ability to readily absorb water. And because of this, it can pull the water out of the strawberry, thus creating that syrup and also making the fruit itself more tender. And this is done through something called osmosis, how it pulls the water out of the strawberry. Osmosis is the water movement across a semi-permeable membrane, which is the cellulose and hemocellulose cell walls of the strawberry. So from an area of greater concentration to lesser concentration. So that means that the water is being pulled out of the strawberry, which has a greater concentration of water, into the sugar, which has a less concentration of water. So the sugar is pulling the water out of the strawberry via osmosis because the sugar is hygroscopic. So as I mentioned, this is a very easy technique. It involves no cooking at all, and you can do this with really any kind of berry or soft fruit. You just put sugar on top, mix it up, and let it sit. Now we're going to work on making our shortcakes while the strawberries are resting. So to do this, we're going to take our self-rising flour, and we're going to go ahead and mix out our sugar. And from there, we're going to rub in our frozen grated butter. And again, if you've seen our buttermilk biscuit video, rubbing in is pretty much just coating the butter in the flour. And this helps to create nice little pockets of flakiness or buttery bits in your dough. And like I mentioned, because this is a shortcake, we're not creaming the butter with sugar like we would in a normal cake. And instead, we're rubbing it into our flour and sugar mixture, which is what the shortening means. So from the shortcake. After the butter has been thoroughly rubbed in, we're going to go ahead and start adding in our wet ingredients. This will be our buttermilk with some vanilla, an egg, and then cream. And we're going to mix this until a nice shaggy dough forms. As I mentioned earlier, a shortcake is similar to a biscuit, but it's not a biscuit. And the reason that this is more of a cake than a biscuit is with the addition of our cream and our egg, we're actually giving it a more tender texture than flaky, what we get in a biscuit. So the egg really does give it a little bit more of a cakey texture. So when you add eggs to things, they tend to lend a more cakey texture to whatever you're baking. So that's where we're getting the more cakey feel from, but it's still more similar to a biscuit just because it is a quick bread and it is a shortened cake, really, if you think about it. So once we get our shaggy dough together, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So now we're going to go ahead and turn the dough out onto a floured surface. And this dough is a little sticky, so we don't want to over mix it or overwork it because we don't want to develop too much gluten. Just like in a regular buttermilk biscuit, we don't want to develop too much gluten because we don't want them to be dense. We still want it to be airy, even though it's going to be more tender like a cake. We still want it to be airy and fluffy and light. We don't want a dense, chewy disc. So you want to fold the flour kind of onto the dough and just fold it until it becomes like a nice cohesive dough ball, in the sense where you can actually flatten it out and start cutting your biscuits, or your shortcakes. And again, you want to fold. You don't really want to like knead it, because we're not trying to develop too much gluten. We're just folding it over itself until it is not as sticky, and we are able to flatten it down and cut our shortcakes. Once the dough has reached a consistency, you just want to pat it down. We're not going to roll it. We're not going to do anything crazy to it. Like I said, we don't want to develop too much gluten, so we're just going to pat it down, and then take our biscuit cutter and cut out a few shortcakes. So as many as you can get out of your dough, just cut them up, and then the scraps you can just smush them back together, pat them down again, and cut as many more as you can until you're left with no more dough. So another little step that gives this a little bit more of a sweetness to it than a biscuit would is we're going to add a little bit of cream on top of our biscuits, or sorry, our shortcakes. We're going to add a little bit of cream on top of our shortcakes, and this is going to help it brown. And then we're going to sprinkle the top with sugar, which gives just to add a little bit of sweetness. And we're going to do this before we put it into the oven so that we can get that nice brown color on top, along with a little bit of a crunch from the sugar. Now we're going to stick these shortcakes in the oven at 450 or 232 degrees Celsius for about 10 to 15 minutes until they come out nice and golden brown. Now while the shortcake's cool, we're going to go ahead and move on to making our whipped cream. So cream is actually full of a lot of milk fats, and whipping is the action of actually adding air into something. So to create this whipped cream, we're going to take the cream, which is full of milk fats, and we're going to make the fats form a stable web-like structure that's going to trap the air that we're whipping into it. And this is done because as you whip the cream, the milk fats actually combine to create like a web. Now, the milk fats become a stable web as you whip it. So the more you whip it, the more stable the fats become in their structure, and the better they're able to hold that air and make a foam. But if you over whip it, the fats will actually form more solid bonds, and they will become butter. So there's a fine line between nice stiff peaks and butter. So you just have to be careful. And here I actually used vanilla sugar syrup, but you can just use some sugar and vanilla extract separately. But if you have vanilla syrup, you can also use that. So you have stiff peaks in your whipped cream once pull the beaters out, and the peaks kind of sit up straight like this, and they don't fall over. So this is when you want to stop, because you don't want to make butter. So now that we have all our ingredients, see that here are the strawberries that we macerated, and you can see that they have like a little bit of syrup forming, and this is what you want. The strawberries are nice and tender. You have a nice little syrup you can drizzle over top of your strawberry shortcakes if you want. So ready, and all we did was add sugar and mix it up. So that we can set that aside. And then we also have our whipped cream that we just made, nice and fluffy and ready. And so what you want to do is you want to grab one of your shortcakes and just cut it open and assemble your strawberry shortcakes. And here we have it, a delicious, easy summer strawberry treat, strawberry shortcakes. We hope you enjoyed learning the science behind this delicious dessert. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a comment below if you learned something new or if you tried the recipe for yourself. And until next time, happy baking!